YouTubers everywhere are in lockstep. This is the greatest game demo ever made. The greatest game demo I've ever played. I have never played anything as fun, as innovative, as well written as Final Fantasy XVI. And of course, this is another example of an AstroTurfing campaign. Square Enix is getting all these e-celebs, people like MoistCritikal, random YouTube shills, people in the comment section, anons on 4chan. A lot of these paid off viral marketers are trying everything they possibly can to try and drum up some kind of interest in Final Fantasy XVI. And what is the line this time? Oh, this is the best demo I've ever played. This is the best Final Fantasy since 9. Isn't it interesting how everyone seems to agree that Final Fantasy 9 was the last good Final Fantasy when it didn't sell that well, it wasn't all that popular. Like, it's a fan favorite among fans, but among casual audiences, I would say, people would say, I would imagine casual audiences didn't start believing Final Fantasy had fallen off until 13, right? 11 had an audience, 12 had an audience, or 10, right? I think it's debatable when exactly Final Fantasy fell off. A lot of hardcore fans say 9, I say 10. I know people who say 12 or 13, but I think the fact that so many people are going out and saying the same thing to try and beat it into your head, to try and social condition you into thinking it's true. I think this is a major red flag that this is a viral marketing campaign. It's not real. It's not authentic. It's not organic. It is completely fake, right? And it's really telling, I think, that more and more people, at least in my community, are starting to spot this stuff the instant it happens, as I pointed out. Because I noticed the same thing with Cyberpunk 2077, right? Where the industry tried to push this meme that the game had been fixed through patches and that the anime incentivized a lot of people to go back and play it, which wasn't actually true. And now they're trying to tell you that we're putting out an expansion. We're expanding Cyberpunk 2077, and we're going to redo all the models, fix all the glitches, add in a new skill tree. It's almost a completely different game. It is a completely different game. So says Susie Hunter, the biggest YouTube dick sucker since Yang Ye, right? The biggest Cyberpunk CD Projekt Red dick sucker since Yang Ye, right? That's where we're at now. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing right now. That's the situation, is that we are seeing a bunch of people try and sell you on these big AAA games from non-Nintendo companies. Now, these people aren't really talking about Tears of the Kingdom. They're not really talking about Nintendo. They're not talking about the exciting upcoming Pikmin 4 or the future of Nintendo Switch. They're trying to convince you to buy Street Fighter 6. They're trying to convince you to buy Final Fantasy 16. They're trying to convince you to do this, do that, do everything except play a Nintendo console, right? That's kind of what we're seeing here. That's exactly what we're seeing here, is just YouTubers trying to utilize all of their influence, every little bit of viewership they can muster to try and push an agenda. And I have to wonder, rather openly, I've been saying this, in videos off and on for the past several years, how influential are these people really? Because, when No Man's Sky came out and people were pushing the Beyond update fixes all the problems, and people started believing it, I honestly thought that YouTubers had a lot more control than they actually did. But when they tried to do the same thing with CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk, right, it fell flat on its face. And in Final Fantasy 16's case, it feels like it's not going anywhere. So I feel it's proportional to how big of a deal the game is, right? No Man's Sky was completely forgotten for a good while before they started doing their shill campaign for it, right? And I think that's why it worked, because the heat died down on Sean Murray and Hello Games. People weren't really talking about it anymore. And then they introduced the propaganda. Then they introduced the campaign. And this was before people could start noticing the patterns, right? And now to this day, you have lots of detractor videos. People have detract my channel, making claims that oh, No Man's Sky is good now with all the updates. Haven't you played the game recently? Yeah, I have played the game after several updates, and it's still shit, right? You can't fix a fundamentally broken game like No Man's Sky. You are not acknowledging that to this day, No Man's Sky is not the product it was promoted as, right? That is the issue, right? Nobody wants to admit the same thing is going to happen to Cyberpunk 2077, and for as long as like CD Projekt Red is trying to sell the game and is trying to promote it and is trying to make it the next big thing, trying to make this expansion successful, you're going to see YouTubers say the exact same thing, that like, oh, the game is going to be updated, it's going to be good, like, please just stay invested, like, keep giving money to CD Projekt Red. It needs to stop, okay? You know, it's embarrassing, and I really have to wonder. Final Fantasy 16 is showing every signs of being a complete bomb. You know, CD Projekt Red at the very least had like a lot of goodwill going into Cyberpunk, with like after The Witcher 3 and after everything else they did. They were like the most beloved company in gaming for a good long while, just because of The Witcher 3, right? People thought that Cyberpunk 2077 would be like the best game of this new decade, right? It would be a genre-defining experience, and it wasn't. It was basic as all out, and nobody cared for it, right? So now, like, it's going to be like another, 5 years before we can see anything new from CD Projekt Red. So they're going to have to, like, milk this dud for that length of time. Because, like, Witcher 3 has stopped selling a long time ago. They have nothing else coming out. They're going to try and lean on the Witcher IP even longer when they had no intention of doing so, as they try and, like, make something else, and it's just not going to happen. They just don't have the talent. Everybody who made Witcher 3 left. Like, it's been a complete disaster for them, and like, nobody is admitting it. Like, that's the problem, is that with these games, you know, Final Fantasy 16, No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk 2077, the developers aren't capable of making a good game. Like, it does not take 5 or 6 years to put out, like, a great game, right? Back in the 90s, Square Enix was putting out, like, great Final Fantasy games, like, every other year, right? You know, Konami used to put out, like, great Castlevania games a year. And now look where we're at. Where we've gone, like, what? Our Order of Ecclesia came out in 2008. It's been, like, over 15 years since the last really good 2D Castlevania game from Konami. When are we going to get another one? Like, if it's going to happen eventually, I'm sure. The IP has remained surprisingly relevant in spite of the lack of new releases. But, like, as a gamer, like, I have no hopes for the future of the franchise, okay? Like, it's not going to be good. They can't just pump it out. Like, they're having problems. They don't have the talent anymore. And the same is true for Cyberpunk and Final Fantasy 16. Like, anybody who follows these projects in any capacity knows this. And yet these YouTubers who supposedly make covering games their careers aren't able to point out the obvious. That Final Fantasy 16 cannot possibly be a good game. That Cyberpunk 2077 cannot possibly be updated to become Game of the Year 2023. Like, it's not possible, right? And yet they're still pretending as if it is. They're pretending as if this is somehow something they can just meme into reality, when it's just never going to happen. And obviously this is their career. Like, they're not actually relevant because they cover video games, or in MoistCritikal's case, make the most boring vlog videos in existence. Like, they are popular because they push the message. They push the agenda. They are trying to manipulate you into thinking these mediocre IPs are in any way relevant or popular in the current year. Like, all of these things have fallen off, and none of these people want to admit it.